my role at Metro is also to kind of work with the Metro faculty, especially new faculty that are maybe not used to, because, you know, our approach is like very much kind of community building in the classroom, talking about social justice issues, and kind of having our pedagogy is very like student centered. So sometimes that's a different approach for faculty. So I'll like support them with ideas or things like that. I'm currently teaching, so like the last Metro class that students will take together is called the History of US Social Movements. So that's the class that I'm teaching right now. My background is a little bit also from community organizing. So I grew up in San Francisco and kind of got politicized as a young person in the Bay Area way back in the day when they were trying to pass youth curfews and break up hip hop parties and all these things. So it was a different moment in history, but I was able to kind of join different youth groups and kind of find mentorship there. And kind of find my role in social movements as an educator, ultimately. I definitely have done some community organizing. I also went to SF State as an undergrad, and I feel like a lot of the classes I took here like supported my community work. But I feel like I would have loved a program like Metro, because I kind of was one of those students that would just go on campus with my headphones and I'd sit in the back of the class, and I wasn't necessarily thinking of SF State as a place I could do my community work or activist work. So it's kind of cool to come back here and now be a teacher, and in some ways I relate to students a lot, but I'm also like from a whole other generation. So, their students are teaching me all the time about what they're facing and dealing with too.
Could you talk about Metro or what?
Oh
I
yeah.
don't remember what it is actually.
Yes. Thank you. And tell me your name.
Kevin,
yes. So Metro College Success Program is basically a program that supports first generation college students in their first 2 years of undergraduate time here. It started a little over 10 years ago, because basically like the data was showing that first generation students tend to drop out in the first 2 years. And you can kind of guess why that might be, right? There's like feeling alienated, feeling like there's no community. It's like there's a whole system to navigate and there's no family with experience that's going to guide you through that. So, and there's just, all kinds of hurdles regarding financial aid, et cetera. So Metro kind of started this model of cohorts. So students basically, based on their kind of major interest or like what they're interested in studying, will get put in a like either like a STEM cohort or maybe criminal justice or whatever, and they'll take 3 classes over their first 2 years together. So they kind of get to build community on some level. With their cohort. They also get extra support from Metro. They'll get an advisor that will kind of check in on them and support and help advocate for them if they need it. And then Metro faculty are all, we're all kind of, a lot of Metro faculty come with community kind of work background or activist background, or just kind of often reflect the student population. So that's kind of the model. And it started out, over 10 years ago in the public health department, very small, but because the retention numbers, it's such an effective model that the retention numbers are actually higher than the universities as a whole. And so now the program has actually expanded into every college on campus. So there's now, I think, 1/3 of incoming freshmen are in Metro. So it's pretty cool. It's like one of the few times you hear of a program expanding. And so, yeah, I've just been on board for 2 years. I came on during the pandemic. So, yeah, I feel really lucky to be, part of a program like this. Yeah. So it's nice that that you all have this, right? But also like Metro definitely wants to support faculty. And so I actually have a teaching square with like Metro faculty that I meet with once a week and kind of do something similar to this. Like if I notice a lot of students are just kind of quiet then I'll be like, oh, we need to break through that somehow. We need to kind of, give a chance for people to connect with each other or just get out of their seats and stuff. So I kind of try to keep an eye out, or just this felt sense of like, how are people doing? Are people really disconnected? What might help kind of shift the energy a little bit? Yeah, I feel like 2 questions I consistently ask myself when I'm designing lesson plans is like, what do I want students to know or understand by the end of this lesson? How do I want them to feel? Right, so it's like, it's not just about like the brain, like, oh, I know all these facts now, but it's like, oh, at the end, I want them to feel either inspired or thoughtful or focused. And then I kind of try to think of like, well, what can I do in my lesson plan to help get to that kind of end place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess I had a thought about the icebreakers. I feel like every class should do that, like on the first day of class, because there's been, well, like most of my classes, sometimes you don't like talk to the people around you until like week 3, week 4. And sometimes at the very like last week, you're like just starting to like really vibe with someone. And yeah, that would have been more useful if you're like already knew each other.
Yeah, I try to do it like throughout from all 16 weeks. I mean, maybe not every single class, we might not have time for an energizer every time, but I definitely, I'll bring it in like way into week 12, 13, have folks do that. When I did recently is, that involved the whole class. I have 38 students and a class exactly the size. I'm like, I don't know why they didn't get it, but I don't know why. But I had them do a kind of silent lineup. So basically they had to get in order of their height, and they had to tell me without talking. And they had to tell me how many minutes they thought it would take them as a group. And they did it in way shorter time than they thought they would. And then I was like, okay, now get in order of your birth date and month. And as a next level, and they actually did really well with that too. They had a couple little like, some people were like not in the right order, but kind of stuff like that where it's like kind of teamwork. I think, then people have to kind of communicate in a different way, gets people like up and out of their seats, that kind of thing. Other questions, thoughts?
So that's an example of an energizer.
Yeah. I have
Kinesthetic,
tons of
the blood
them, I can tell you.
Have them wrestle or something. No.
Well, I mean, that's when the whole COVID thing, that's,
Tina has done this before, but I've also done a human bingo, which is pretty fun. You suggested it for the teaching grade last semester, which we probably do this semester. Facinghistory.org is actually a website that you all should have learned about in your orientation to become a teacher, and that has some really great teaching strategies for active learning. And if you go to the kinesthetic category, those will be those kind of blood pumpers that Tina's talking about, get you up and moving around.
Called the question game, and I usually like to do it when we're about to kind of do a lesson where I want them to be really engaged. And literally the rules are, so it's like, say we were gonna play, you can only ask questions. You can't repeat a question that's already been asked, and you can't take too long to ask a question. So what you do, and the questions don't have to relate to each other at all. Like they could be any question, and you can choose the direction. So that's what kind of like keeps people on their toes. So I could say like, why is the sky blue? And then you could ask a question that way or this way, until kind of someone kind of takes too long or repeats a question, then they have to sit out. And then it gets down to like 2 people who are really like on top of it. And it's kind of funny because I feel like the longer it goes, the more like wild people's questions, like the questions just start being like, don't make sense, but they're hilarious. or people start being like, did you brush your teeth this morning? Or, that kind of thing. That's always a favorite for me. And it's pretty simple.